So I'm going to mute all background noise. Please unmute yourselves to make a comment. I'm now going to share the screen, and we'll go to Passover. What is Passover? Okay. The 8-day festival of Passover is celebrated in the early spring from the 15th through the 22nd of the Hebrew month of Nisan, which we're presently in. Today is the 6th day of Nisan. It commemorates the emancipation of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, in ancient Egypt. And by following the rituals of Passover, we have the ability to relive and experience the true freedom that our ancestors gained. And I think we speak every year about the idea. It's just looking at Passover, Pesach, as a historical commemoration. Really, that would rob us of the soul of Passover, which is about liberation, our own freedom, our own constrictions, our personal Egypts. By following the rituals of Passover, we have the ability to live and experience the true freedom that our ancestors gained. The story in a nutshell: after many decades of slavery, actually several centuries of slavery, to the Egyptian pharaohs, during which time the Israelites were subjected to backbreaking labor and unbearable horrors, God saw the people's distress and sent Moses to Pharaoh with a message: "Send forth my people so that they may serve me." Despite numerous warnings, Pharaoh refused to heed God's command. God then sent upon Egypt 10 devastating plagues, afflicting them and destroying everything from the livestock to the crops. I think we all know that. We've seen the movie and seen the Haggadah. We know the story. At the stroke of midnight of 15 of Nisan, which is Pesach, in other words, right now when we sit down to the Seder, it's just because the Jewish calendar begins at night. It is already the 15th of Nisan, and at midnight of the Seder night. In other words, this year it's on a Monday night. That midnight is when the Jews left. God visited the last of the 10 plagues on the Egyptians, killing all their firstborn. While doing so, God spared the children of Israel, passing over their homes, hence the name of the holiday. Pharaoh's resistance was broken, and he virtually chased his former slaves out of the land. And this is actually an important thing. He chased them out of the land. When the Jews left Egypt, the Torah says they left in a hurry. They left in a hurry. So we say, we tell maybe kindergarten kids they were rushing out, but really they didn't have to rush. But he chased them out. Said, "You guys are a real pain in the neck. Get out of here." So they ran. They were hurrying. The Israelites left in such a hurry, in fact, that the bread they baked as provisions for the way did not have time to rise. 600,000 adult males, plus many more women and children. So you're talking about 2+ million people left Egypt, and we don't have an exact number, left Egypt on the night and began the trek to Mount Sinai and their birth as God's chosen people. So they leave Egypt, and 7 weeks later, they're at Mount Sinai receiving the Torah. So this is the growth of a nation: slaves, liberated, and then 7 weeks, and they're ready to receive the Torah. They are maturing into a nation from the ragtag Hebrew slaves. Next, Passover observances. Passover is divided into 2 parts. First 2 days and last 2 days, the latter commemorating the splitting of the Red Sea, are full-fledged holidays. So in Israel, just for full disclosure, in Israel, there's actually only 1 day it's only 7 days, and 1 day holiday in the sense that we don't work, and then we're limited in our external creativity, and then the 7th day the same, and the 5 days in between, still got to eat matzah, and there's no bagels, but it's you can lead a more conventional life. Outside of Israel, since 2,000 years ago, or more. There's now that we have 2 days of holiday, which is so the first 2 days of Pesach, and this year it's Tuesday and Wednesday. That's holiday. Then what we call Chol HaMoed, which is like the intermediate days where you can go back to more conventional life just without the bagels or Cheerios. And then we have a 7th day and an 8th day, which are both Yom Tov. And here we'll say, holiday candles are lit at night. Kiddush and sumptuous holiday meals are enjoyed on both sets of nights and days. First and second, Yom Tov, 7th and 8th, Yom Tov, and we treat it almost like a Shabbos. We don't go to work, drive, ride, switch on or off electric devices. We are permitted to cook and to carry outdoors except on Shabbat. Unless it falls on Shabbos, it has different rules. The middle 4 days are called Chol HaMoed, semi-festive intermediate days, when most forms of work are permitted. To commemorate the unleavened bread that the Israelites ate when they left Egypt, we don't eat or even retain in our possession any chametz. Chametz means
No bagel.
exactly. It's breads in the strict sense, but it's anything that really it could have some type of grain as part of it, and therefore we wouldn't trust that it's kosher for Pesach. Or even had a contact with it. We don't eat or even retain in our possession any chametz from midday of the day before Passover. In other words, from Monday afternoon till the conclusion of the holiday. Chametz means leavened grain. Any food or drink that contains even a trace of wheat, barley, rye, oats, spelt are the derivatives, and which wasn't guarded from leavening or fermentation. And most things they're not guarded from it. This includes bread, cake, cookies, cereal, pasta, and most alcoholic beverages. Rice. Well, rice is only for us Ashkenazim. Moreover, almost any processed food or drink can be assumed to be chametz unless certified otherwise, because unless someone's careful about it, you can't trust that it's chametz free. Ridding our homes of chametz is an intensive process. It involves a full-out spring cleaning, search and destroy mission during the weeks before Passover, and it culminates with a ceremonial search for chametz on the night before Passover, and then a chametz burning ceremony on the morning before the holiday. Just also for full disclosure, it is traditional for many, many centuries that pre-Pesach is a time of cleaning and crazy cleaning, and cleaning is good. For the halacha of it it's not as necessary. The simple halacha of it. The simple halacha of it is I'm not allowed to own in my home, in my person, or own in my possession chametz. But if someone else brings chametz into my house, there's no problem with that. So if I have a painter who's coming on Chol HaMoed to fix something in my house, I don't really have to check their lunch pail. Yeah, I don't want them to leave crumbs around, but it's not mine, it's theirs. It's about owning it. So we have a process, first of all, of we sell our chametz. Chametz that we know about, some of the chametz that we don't know about. So, and it's an important exercise. Then we also renounce our ownership. It's a simple little formula. So technically, my Cheerios, they're not mine. So there's no problem with me having Cheerios in my house. Why do we put them away and put a skull and bones, crossbones over there? Don't go into this closet and all of that. Simply because habits. This is from the times of the Talmud. Say just because of habits. If I come down every morning and bleary-eyed, and I have a donut and my coffee, Pesach morning I might do the same. So I have granola every morning. So my granola is going to be taped up. So because the Talmud and Jewish law it takes into account that many of us are a little absent-minded.
Instead of a donut, have a matzo ball with some filling.
There we go. That's preparation.
Who buys your chametz?
A non-Jew.
So your website has a counterparty, Gentile counterparty?
No, they sell it to me,
Uh-huh.
and I actually sell it to another rabbi who sells it to a non-Jew. It's actually a very complex process for
Sounds
the sale.
like it.
Yeah, the sale part.
Mm.
So even though technically I could do it myself, I don't.
So you have another Rebbe who's a clearing house.
Yeah, clearing house. Actually, yeah, we sell it to actually one of our staff at the College of Mars.
Like DTCC or Euroclear.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so even though it is an intensive process, actually, what's even more important than the intensive process is make sure that we renounce our ownership of it, we sell it. Then you may be eating a non-Jew's Cheerios, but at least it's not. That's better than actually eating your own.
And the process gets
On
reversed
Pesach.
after the Pesach.
Say it again.
Process gets reversed after the Pesach.
Right. You have to leave it like 2 hours to make sure it's all done.
So Gentile gives the money back and
The
profit.
Gentile walks away with a profit.
He does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so does the rabbi.
Right.
The handling costs.
Exactly.
Transaction. It's called transaction.
Yeah. Chametz cannot be disposed of or can be sold to a non-Jew for the duration of the holiday.
6%.
Instead of chametz, we eat matzah, flat unleavened bread. It is a mitzvah to partake of matzah on the 2 Seder nights. Again, this is stuff that I think we all pretty much know. And during the rest of the holiday, except Shabbat, it is optional. The highlight of Passover is the Seder, observed on each of the first 2 nights of the holiday, only 1 night in Israel. The Seder is a 15-step family-oriented tradition and a ritual-packed feast. Okay. Now, we're gonna, like we always do in these, we're gonna go into a certain nuance, a limited nuance, which is actually going to be a portal, a conduit through which we can get into more general ideas of the holiday. Before we do that, a couple of things. We're very, very, Torah law is very, very strict. Careful about having no chametz. We're going to use the professional term. In other words, the unleavened bread or grains and the derivatives. Nothing at all. So whereas if my wife is cooking a stew of kosher meat, and my painter is drinking pork juice and accidentally has a drop into that into the stew. That's not good. But since it's only minute and there's certain ratios, we don't lose our kosher stew. In any law, to be able to fulfill it, there has to be a certain amount. In order for something to be non-kosher, there's a certain amount.
Pea-sized, huh?
It's actually it's not pea-sized, but that one would be a little different. It's be 1 in 60. Okay, but and when it comes to Pesach, even a little bit, the tiniest speck is a problem. So that's one of the reasons we clean everything out. And they're also, it's like a single Cheerio. Technically, it's a little thing. However, if it's under my couch and somehow, but that's something, I'm the type where I would say, well, it's a Cheerio, I'll eat it. It looks something that has some value to me. It's a problem. So again, if I've renounced ownership and I've sold it, all that's good. But like we were talking about before about the gambling, when I renounce ownership, how wholehearted am I? If our employee at the college comes to my house over Pesach and starts to eat my granola, then they're going to say, "Yeah, what's yours?" I say, "Leave me alone. That's mine." So there's even the renouncing. There's a certain suspicion. We want to try and get it out of the way if possible, and sell it and try to be as wholehearted about it as possible.
Happening in a roughly Jewish home, we were in church with our rabbi. We just come to check it out for fun. Yeah.
In the Jewish Rabbi, yeah. In the Hebrew home for the aged.
Yes,
Yeah.
and also in my mother's hospital. We have to be sure that everything is clean.
Yeah, this is it.
Everything is
Right.
perfect for that.
Rabbis make a living on Pesach. So here we're very careful about any what we're going to call chametz. Now, spiritually too, if you want to drill down into this, because it is going to be part of our discussion and should be part of our Pesach. The chametz matzah dynamic has an important spiritual rhythm to it and the subtext to it. The difference between matzah and chametz is that one has been allowed to rise. Even if it's without yeast, it'll rise a little bit. But the risen dough is what we stay away from, and what we eat on Pesach is the chametz. Why is that? One of the spiritual lessons from that is that Pesach is about self-refinement. Pesach, you had people, and we're going to read about it. The slaves who were freed were not in a high moral state. They'd been living for centuries, not only beaten and oppressed, but really surrounded by a very immoral Egyptian culture. The fact they knew they were Jews, and they still, they held on to their Jewish names and they spoke their Hebrew, that it was something, they held on to something, but they didn't understand. They weren't able to understand themselves, study themselves, or to pass on to their children any of the depth of what it meant to be a Hebrew of monotheism. So the spirituality was very, very bottom of the barrel. As a matter of fact, the language of the Talmud is that if there are, and we'll have it here to some extent, if there are 50 levels of what we call impurity, they were at like 49. They were almost gone. Where a person has really, no one's ever totally gone, because we have our soul. But the fact is, sometimes we can become so immersed and so in our own mishagas and so unplugged from what would keep us above water that in given normal circumstances we're closed off to our sense of identity. So they had a problem. Let's take that from there to us. Let's say I have a weakness for alcohol, or I have a temper I can't control. I have my own Egypt, and I can't see my way out of it. There's the Jews rushing out of Egypt symbolizes how they needed to get away. They needed that sense of an inner turmoil, saying, I can't do this. I have to get away from my pitfall, my vice. And it's when a person, let's say, has an alcohol problem, just to say, no, I'm going to cut down from 6 drinks a day to 4 drinks a day is probably not a great idea. It's to say, I'm going to do nothing for a while, and then it depends. You speak to to your person's sponsor and see whether he can even start back with 1. But at least you swing back, or let's go instead away from alcoholism. It's more of a disease. I'm a chocoholic, and I don't stop. So then they say, I'm going to go through an exercise. Our Jewish version of Lent, I'm going to go 2 weeks or whatever it is. I'm not going to eat any chocolate. I'm going to show myself I don't have to. And then maybe I'll start again in a healthy way. But there has to be a certain, a more feverish break from it. Say, this is, I can't relax about this. So the Jews going out of Egypt, they rushed away, meaning that they were repelling it. This was a terrible place for us. For us, in our personal Egypt, also, it's in order to break its hold, you've got to really push away, not just walk away. Now, one of the elements to self-betterment, to self-refinement, is the difference between chametz and matzah. Is that we need to have the humility to recognize, first of all, to hear feedback from those who care about us, because some people, when they're deep in a problem, they don't hear. They're just rationalizing the way to stay in the problem. And to have the humility to say, you know something, I'm human, I'm allowed to have flaws. I have a flaw. I gotta hear it because I can do better than this. But that takes humility not to be able to let go of whatever vice for some reason is making me feel better about it. So matzah symbolizes the humility. The chametz symbolizes the arrogance that keeps us in our place. And therefore, since Passover is about liberating ourselves from our vices, from our traps, we not even the slightest amount of chametz is allowed because we're very, very careful. With all of that as a yes,
When I worked with smokers,
yes,
I get them to understand and internalize that there's a difference between stopping and quitting. It puts the locus of control inside the person. If you quit and you break down and have another cigarette, you've sinned. It's all over. It's gone. But if you choose to have a cigarette, then that's a lapse, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily will resume.
I think it's a very important insight. It's about the ability to control ourselves and not be controlled by something. And that's really I mean, even though we are free people, if you drill down a little bit, often we're not so free. We're slaves to different things in our lives.
You have to remember the patients that lie. When I was working for the Alcohol Rehabilitation Center in Newark, I was volunteer every Wednesday morning. It was in psychiatry and everything, so I had to do the medical aspect. I talked to them, like anybody else, I had a computer. Talking to them, I said, look at this, everything, close it. I close everything, I cannot anymore. Tell me. This helping program, doc. I took too many drugs all my life. I come to the psychiatrist to tell them everything is working perfect. I can feel the check. I will never stop doing what I'm doing. Drugs.
Yeah. I'm sure there's that element too. Someone who really needs matzah. All right. Thanks,
Lots of months.
lots of matzah. Okay, so now let's get into something here, and actually one more preface is necessary. Those of you who have been by our Seder here in Chabad, know that we have a certain shtick that many in the very observant community, I say very observant, what people call Haredi, whatever you want, Hasidic or not only Hasidic, shtick we have, which is we don't eat wet matzah. Wet. And that's why when we're here, even by the Seder, we're careful not to put it with we have little pouches for the matzah. Why do we do that? There is something that's known by, it's a Yiddish name, which is gebrot. Gebrot means broken. What do we do? Because people would crumble up matzah and make matzah brei. That's a Jewish tradition, or matzah balls. In the Haredi world, you will not find people eating matzah balls on Pesach. And my wife makes it out of, it's like fake matzah. Real matzah balls you're not going to find it, or even eating matzah brei. Why? Because there is a fear, which is a far-fetched fear, but it's not impossible fear, that maybe there's unbaked flour on the matzah, and that will now touch the water, and it will rise. And as I said, even a minute amount is a problem. So it's kosher. There are observant Jews who eat the gebrot, and I'm not, I'm certainly not telling you what to do at home, but we have a shtick. A lot of people. In Chabad, on the 8th day of Pesach, last day of Pesach, we eat that. You have matzah balls, you have matzah brei. Actually, we have matzah in everything. Even when the wine falls out of the kiddush thing, you put a little matzah in there and you eat that too. Well, now, this traces back to a letter from the founder of Chabad, because other Hasidim don't have it at all. My mother's side of the family are Hasidim and not Chabad. They would never have gebrot on Pesach. Mix it together. But we We're together for Pesach. It was on like Sfardim and Ashkenazim. They did their thing, and we did our thing. We are on the 8th day. Why do we have it on the 8th day? I didn't think that problem was bothering you, but the answer is relevant to. 1 second. Why is this? I apologize. I think this is not the text 1. Oh yeah, okay. I have read all that you have written in your letter. This is from the founder of Chabad. And I enclose here with a brief response regarding the issue of cooking crumbled matzah. So I say they would break it. It doesn't have to become crumbled. The truth is there's no outright prohibition against doing so because it's matzah. It's kind of a far-fetched problem. Nevertheless, one who acts stringently shall receive blessings. This is not a ridiculous stringency without any basis. Rather, there's a strong basis for observing the stringency, namely avoiding the possibility of transgressing the biblical prohibition against eating chametz. We can plainly observe that many times flour remains on the surface of some matzahs, even after they've been baked. This happens because the dough was tough, was not kneaded thoroughly, and this minute amount of flour that is on the matzah can become chametz. If the pieces of such a matzah are placed into soup, as many are accustomed to doing, one can, God forbid, inadvertently transgress a biblical prohibition. So even though he says there's no prohibition, and it's fine, what you're doing at home, we're not commenting on, but there is a reason we have this tradition in what we're going to call the more Haredi world. Now,
interesting. The last 3 words that you mentioned is very interesting about the comments, but the matzah become with contact with the soup become.
Yeah. And we're very careful about it. Text 2 we have from this is something that the Rebbe wrote before he became Rebbe. He published a Haggadah with notes, scholarly notes. He writes that we in Chabad are extremely careful to avoid consuming what's called matzah shruya, wet matzah, or gebrocks in Yiddish. Therefore, the matzahs on the table are covered at all times, so that water doesn't spill on them. Before we pour water or any other liquid that is mixed with water in the cup or bowl, we inspect the cup or bowl to ensure there are no crumbs of matzah in it. When we wash our hands during and after the meal, we do not pass our wet hands over our lips because we might have matzah on our lips. So we're kind of fanatic about it. We're very careful. Yet. Text 3 from the founder of Chabad back to his his letter. He says, and this is on page 236. Nevertheless, one who is lenient on the final day of the holiday for the sake of rejoicing in the holiday has nothing to lose. Last day, you do it. Which is interesting because we're really fanatic about it for 7 days. And the 8th day, he says, it's okay. You're not going to lose anything. But the subsequent Rebbes of Chabad went way beyond this letter. We find this is from the previous Rebbe speaking about his father, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe. My saintly father, the Rebbe Rashab Rabbi Shalom Dov Herson, was particularly to specifically eat matzah shruya, again, wet matzah on Achron Shal Pesach, the last day of Pesach. The entire Passover, he was particular to not eat matzah together with any type of food. He wouldn't eat. You have a gefilte fish, you have it with matzah. He would eat his matzah, put it away, then he'd eat his gefilte fish. He didn't want to make any connection between the possibility of wetness and the matzah. But on Achron Shal Pesach, the last day of Pesach, he would do so deliberately, exhibiting this custom in public. He would eat matzah with the fish, with the soup, with the meat. He was matzah everywhere. So it became a tradition, and that's the way it is in Chabad, that commonly done, that on the last day we go to town with matzah and liquor. Now, why is that? Why is it if the founder of Chabad said, so presumably everybody is staying loyal to his theme, he only says it's okay. He doesn't say go to town with it. So the simplest answer would be that in the world of Jewish law, when we have loyalty to a specific halachic decisor, when they permit something that is otherwise forbidden, It's not for us, well, it's a plan B. We'll go out of our way to do it because this is someone we really respect and we want to show our respect for them. So the Talmud actually talks to us about a different topic, not Pesach, but Sukkot, when it's talking about what is a necessary for the not the willow branch, the Hadass is myrtle. The myrtle branch that we use in the lulav. It's a dense-leaved branch, it has to be densely leaved, is valid for the mitzvah. One that is not dense-leaved is invalid. Okay, so how do you define dense-leaved? What is the definition of dense-leaved? Rabbi Yehuda said it's a branch that has 3 leaves emerging from the same stem. So you have to look at it and say if there's 3 together on the same coming out at the same level, that's dense, and you want to be able to have a few levels of that. Yes.
What mitzvah are they talking about?
Lulav.
Lulav.
Lulav. Yeah, that's what I was
Okay.
talking about. Yeah. That Rav Kahana says, even if only 2 leaves emerge from one stem, and a 3rd leaf emerges from another stem just below those 2, it is valid. So he is a little bit laxer. He says it doesn't have to be 3 at the same level. It can be 2 and then one a little lower. It sounds like a plan B. If you couldn't find, when you go to the lulav store, you couldn't find myrtle branches with, perfect 3, so you got 2 and a little bit, it's okay. Rabbi Kahana said it's okay, we don't have to go finding different myrtle branches. But Rabbi Acha, what the Talmud says, the lesson for us here is Rabbi Acha, the son of a great rabbi, who was a student of Rav Kahana, would deliberately seek a myrtle branch with 2 one-leaf configuration. Now, so he went into the lulav store, and the proprietor sees there's a great rabbi coming, and he says, "I got myrtles for you, and they're perfect, 3-tiered." Let's say, something. Show me if you have 2 in 1. Why do you want 2 in 1? That's not the optimal way to do it. He says, because my rabbi, Rabbi Kahana, he said that's permissible, and he's my rabbi, and that's where I'm proud to say that I follow his opinion. Since Rabbi Kahana ruled it is valid, so one could say that since the whole Hasidic world or the Lakewood world, the Haredi world doesn't have any mix matzah with liquid at all over Pesach, and the founder of Chabad said on the 8th day it's okay, so we go to town with it. We're different. It's okay. We love our Alter Rebbe, the Rabbi Shlomo Zalman. He said it's okay. That's why we're going with it.
Going back one page.
Yes.
Okay, when we have matzah with charosis, doesn't that count as wetting the matzah?
That's a great question. What about matzah and charosis? So the answer is that we make sure that our charosis is not liquidy. Our charosis, it has some original. When we make the charosis, we there's a little bit of wine in there, but a little, and then we use napkins before we put it on the Seder plate, just to make sure it's not liquidy. Yeah, good thing we thought about that one too.
Hey, I make my own charosis.
No, we have and the leaves also. My job at home since I was 4 years old was drying out the leaves, because the leaves of the myrrh are going together.
As you eat matzah mixes with your saliva.
Once it's inside, all bets are off. Yeah.
Cut them out.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Okay, now let's take a look where we're going to go. This is really about the rhythm. This is obviously it's important ideas, but we didn't get together on Sunday morning to talk about this somewhat out there idea of not having matzah balls on Pesach. We're trying to understand what Pesach is and drill down into also what's the difference between the first days and the last days. So one thing that the Rebbe says here is that the first day of Passover, it's a time of liberation, right? Liberating ourselves from our vices and historically coming out of Pesach, coming out of Egypt. He says the first day of Passover is our holiday commemorating how God liberated us from Egypt. We knew that. He says that was the first redemption. of the Jews, and it was carried out by Moses, the first Redeemer. That was the beginning. What's the final day of Passover? Final day of Passover is not celebrating leaving Egypt so much, even though it's part of Passover. It's actually, it focuses attention on celebrating the future redemption. It's celebrating Mashiach, that when our full redemption from all the infirmities of the world in which we live, even if we're not slaves, God forbid. And I mean, this year we have problems with anti-Semitism and Hamas and the Iranians, but usually, we're living pretty good lives. But still, it's not a Mashiach world. Life can and should be so much better. When God will send Mashiach to liberate us from our current and final exile, Mashiach will be the final Redeemer. So the first days of from this perspective, and it's not just the Rebbe's perspective, it's a perspective of the Kabbalists, is that first days of Passover celebrate predominantly leaving Egypt. The last days of Passover celebrate leaving the exile, leaving our current situation into the world of Mashiach. First day of Passover is Moses' day of celebration, and the final day of Passover is Mashiach's day of celebration. And as we're going to see, we see right here, text 7, the Haftorah, after the Torah reading throughout the world, on the 8th day of Passover, is from Isaiah about Mashiach. And we will read in shuls all over the world. A shoot shall spring forth from the stem of Jesse. Jesse was King David's father, and King David is the progenitor of Mashiach. And a twig shall sprout from his roots. The Spirit of God shall rest upon him, a spirit of wisdom and understanding, a spirit of counsel and heroism, a spirit of knowledge and fear of God. And he shall be animated by the fear of God, and neither with the sight of his eyes shall he judge, nor with the hearing of his ears shall he chastise, because he's going to be human, but dealing with the world in a superhuman way. He shall judge the poor justly, and he shall chastise with equity the humble of the earth, and he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall put the wicked to death. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faith the girdle of his loins. Okay. They translated two different Hebrew words, both as loins, which we'll get into another time. Okay, but the main thing is that he's girded by righteousness and faith. Okay. Now to here, the Baal Shem Tov, given this, the founder of the Hasidic movement, all Hasidim, he had a custom, which wasn't very well known. It was the custom of the Baal Shem Tov to partake of 3 meals on the last day of Passover. The last day of Passover, he would have his evening meal, the night, then a regular Yom Tov, a night meal, an afternoon meal, but then he would do a third meal. And the last of these he called Mashiach's Su'uda. Su'uda means a festive meal. The festive meal of Mashiach. For on the last day of Passover, the radiance of Mashiach is openly revealed. The Baal Shem Tov would say, and spiritual masters would say, that one can access the Mashiach energy within ourselves and within the world to a greater extent on the last day of Passover. So Passover, the last day of Passover, it's not just about the matzah balls. The last day of Passover is about experiencing a different type of liberation. We talk about the liberation of the Hebrew slaves going and who come out and become a people at Sinai. That's the first days. The last days, we're talking about things differently. It's Mashiach. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, first of all, I said before that I pointed out before that the Torah tells us explicitly that the Jews rushed out of Egypt. Isaiah says explicitly that when we leave this state of being, we call exile, it's not going to be hurried. There's a contrast between the leaving, going towards Mashiach and leaving Egypt. Not with haste shall you go forth, and not in a flurry of flight shall you go. Why does he have to mention that? Because when we left Egypt, we rushed. He says here, there's no rush. God goes before you, and your rear guard is the God of Israel. It says here, there's no rush. Now, why is there no rush? There's no rush because, as I said before, Pesach is about us struggling to disengage from our vices. And that takes attention, and that takes a certain fever to move away from it, get out of its grip. We run away from it. When Mashiach, the world has shifted, there's no vices. There's a shift there's an inner liberation where we don't have to worry about those vices because they no longer have a grip. We don't have to run away from it. We walk to a better situation. It shall come to pass on that day, it says, Zechariah says, about the time of Mashiach, says the Lord of hosts, I will cut off the names of the idols from the earth. They shall no longer be mentioned. Also the false prophets, and the spirit of impurity I will remove from the earth. So in the times of Mashiach, there isn't that spirit, our own inner spirit of impurity. So Mashiach represents a very settled and more permanent state of self-control and being, where even the recovering alcoholic is allowed to have a drink because there's no longer that grip. But in the real world, our vices you got to watch out for. So again, take a more benign one, a chocoholic. I show myself for 2 weeks that I can live without it. I got control. So now I choose to have a chocolate. I can do it healthily. There's nothing treif about chocolate. So it makes it treif. Chocolate's fine. But for some reason I had a weakness. It grabs me. If I'm working on my temper and I say I am not going to respond negatively to anything that gets under my skin because I want to show myself I don't have to do that. You know something? And I go for 2 weeks for it, and I've shown myself my mastery. Well, it's never good to lose your temper, but responding, that's a natural thing, and only stifling. It's probably not even healthy. But you want to do it like a mensch. So if I'm in a situation where I have an opportunity to voice my feelings about Hamas, or how you know the irrationality of a world that is focusing on Israel and what's doing in Gaza and forgetting about the innocents kidnapped. I don't like it to scream like a banshee, but I can be forceful because I'm in a healthier place to do it constructively. So it's being able to get to there. Now, we can do that, you know, with our own self-work. The times of Mashiach is a total self-actualization where all our vices are settled. And that's also expressed by what Isaiah writes, and this is a famous thing: the wolf shall lie with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie with a kid, and a calf and a lion cub and a fatling shall lie together, and the small child shall lead them. And a cow and a bear shall graze together, the children shall lie, and a lion and like cattle shall eat straw. And it says, and an infant shall play over the hole of an old snake and over the eyeball of an adder. So a snake is the Torah symbol of negativity. We were saying it's going to become benign. Our own inner snake becomes benign, no longer dangerous. And a weaned child shall stretch forth his hand.
In medicine, you use the snake as a healing.
I'm sorry?
In medicine, you use the snake as a healing symbol.
A snake as a, yeah. I think it comes from us. No, because later on in the Torah, I'll tell you where it comes from. There's later on in the Torah, there's a plague. And Moses is told to raise a rod that looks like a snake with this image of a snake, and that heals them. So that's the image of healing. These things they trace back to us. Okay, now let's bring this a little more home. The Zohar tells us, and I mentioned this already, but now let's more dive into it. The Zohar, the Kabbalah tells us, when the Jews were in Egypt, they became sullied and corrupted by all forms of impurity to the point that they were under the influence of 49 powers of impurity. Jews look at Jews going out of Egypt as really a mess, an emotional and moral mess. They're out of control. Moses says, you're out of control. I'm taking you out of this situation. And we can do better. We're going to go to Sinai. And at Sinai, you're going to actually experience the God who loves you. And is going to give you a paradigm for life that you will help you enrich your lives. And you can take control of your lives. So the Jews are brought up, but they're not in good shape. They're a mess, they're an addict or whatever it is, and now they have to find more discipline. We've discussed other years also that there's an exercise the Jews went through. A 7-week exercise, leaving Egypt until they get to Sinai. It was 49 days, 7 weeks. We still count those 49 days, the counting of the Omer. And those 49 days was a time for them to get a grip. It was a time for their own introspection and self-betterment and to look at where their lives were a mess and work on getting that under control. So it was 7 weeks of self-betterment. And if you look here in the Zohar 2, text 13, this is what we begin counting on the first day of Passover. In other words, the second night, Tuesday night this year, we start counting the Omer, start counting the 7 weeks. We count the days as well as the weeks. We say, and then as time goes on the 8th day, that night, we say today is 8 days of 8 days, which is 1 week and 1 day of the Omer. So we go through the 49 days, the 7 days 7 weeks that way. It's in our prayer, and it's all over the internet. We count days as well as weeks. Why? Because it is a mitzvah to count both days and weeks. For each day, we exit one power of impurity and replace it with a power of purity. We look at each of those 7 weeks as representing a certain element of our personality. And the 7 days are sub-units of that personality. And I work on that. So for example, the first week is a week we call it Chesed, and again, it's all in our prayer book. The Chesed is connection. It could be friendship, it could be love, it could be kindness, and we look at that and say, "Where's my kindness?" Number one, there's the first of the 7 is kindness within kindness, or love within love. Well, we can do acts of love or acts of kindness, but not really with that much emotion, because who knows and who cares sometimes. As long as people got the expression, that's what it is. But as people, we don't want to just do acts. We want to experience the love within love. So the first day examines the love or the friendship or the kindness within kindness of friendship. In other words, I didn't only do something for a friend. I took a minute or at least a few seconds to think about the friendship, to think about what the person means to me. The next one is discipline within friendship or within love. The discipline is sometimes we got to make sure not to overreach. I have a friend, we're friendly, we're such good friends, and maybe I want to pop in on him at 11 o'clock at night. Maybe give someone their space. When it comes to someone you love or some friendship or whatever it is, we dissect these 7 different elements of the personality, the 7 weeks, and we work on them to see how we're doing and to try to strengthen. At the end of the 7 weeks, what do we have is the holiday of Shavuos. What happens on the holiday of Shavuos? That's when we celebrate the receiving the Torah, but there's a biblically prescribed offering that's brought. What's the offering? From your dwelling places, we'll read in the Torah, you shall bring bread for waving, 2 loaves made from 2 esronim, there shall be a fine flour, and there shall be baked leaven, the first offering to God. It's not matzah, it's bread. Because matzah symbolizes when we have to be a little bit more austere and strip ourselves down to our basics and say, this has got a grip on me. Bread symbolizes that we can be me. I can have my chocolate. I can have a strong opinion because I'm not out of control. So matzah, I eat matzah all year actually, but matzah it's not prescribed spiritually for all year. bread, healthy bread, challah. That's what that's what we're after 7 weeks of self-work. We don't have to only stick with the matzah. And talking to my sponsor, I'm in a better spot. I can be more me and not worry about my vices. And as my mom writes about that, because I should have done this earlier, it's before that, it's the Torah says is we've been bred for on Shavuos, and there's explicitly stated in Torah there should be leavened bread. How were they prepared? One would bring yeast from another place and place it into the Asara measure. They would then fill that measure with fine flour and leaven with that yeast. In other words, it was leavened bread.
What is Isaron?
And Isaron is it's a biblical it's got a couple ounces. Yeah. Okay. Now, here we find even an expression within the Torah to be proud in the ways of the Lord. Pride is something. Say that's I don't know who says pride comes before the fall, but it's not ours. It's not from our scripture. But we like humility. We believe in humility. The Matzah is about humility. But if someone is in with friends today, and they say, you know something? With all due respect to Israel, they're way out of control with what's going on in Gaza. If you believe that that's misdirected, don't be humble. In the sense, if humble means meek and not opening your mouth, you can open your mouth nicely. Don't be offensive. Don't be obnoxious. But to say, I have a different opinion, and I want to share. That is, as we say, it's the humility of matzah is an important step in our self-refinement, but it doesn't mean we should be a shmata. It doesn't mean that we can just we don't have a sense of self. A sense of self is what gives us a space to say, no, I want to make a change. I can make a change. I have a voice. We should have a voice for good. Again, if we're temperamental, if we're out of control in the way we speak, go to matzah for a while. Get a grip. But the idea is to be the full you, and the full you means on all cylinders. And this is in text 17 from the founder of Chabad in another work of his. Truth is that one must be exceedingly humble. Nevertheless, a person should have some resolve, if even a bit of pride. For if one would not have any pride, they would never engage the service of God, for they'd always belittle themselves, thinking, who am I? What does God care about me? What is my service worth? One needs to have some pride. So where is all this leading? For 7 days of Pesach, we're absolutely careful not to have any contact, us fundamentalists. We're absolutely careful not to have any contact of our matzah with water, with liquid, because it's all about the humility. It's all about the simplicity. It's all about that exercise of getting out of Egypt. The 8th day, we're celebrating Mashiach. We're not running out of Egypt. We're recognizing that there's a place we can experience Mashiach today, even though Mashiach hasn't come. My personal Mashiach is a self-actualization of myself. And a self-actualization of myself doesn't mean that I have to be afraid of I can't do this positive thing because because I'm afraid of my vices. I'm going to lose my temper, or I guess the chocolate doesn't really work so well here. But the point is that it's the 8th day. We're ready to take a world actualized because we're living our own Mashiach, and we feel that we're safe to bring out our best selves, and it's not going to get out of control. So here are the key points. Number one, the Chabad custom is to eat as much matzah shruya, which is, again, it's called gebrokt in Yiddish, or it's wet matzah, as possible on the last day of Passover. Achron shel Pesach, which means the final day of Pesach, 8th day of Pesach, is a celebration of the future messianic redemption. Number 3, when Mashiach comes, all evil and impurity will be eradicated. Therefore, on Achron Shal Pesach, the last day of Pesach, we are less concerned with remote possibilities of chametz, which represents ego and evil. Sefirat Omer, the counting of the Omer, the 7 weeks, is a process of spiritual refinement. Each day we refine one part of it, one midah, one element, attribute within us. And finally, on number 5, on Achron Shal Pesach, the 8th day, we have already refined one entire midah in counting through the Omer. By the time you get to the 8th day, you've gone through one of the 7 weeks. Therefore, we are less concerned about the remote possibility of matzah shruya turning into chametz. All right. So, if any of you do not have shmura matzah for your seder, please let us know. We'll get you some shmura matzah. And if any of you are still available for the seder, we have a seder here the first night. And we'd love to have you. We're not going to be meeting next Sunday, maybe because of right before the Yom Tov. A couple of Sundays. I'll let you know when we're meeting again. Sundays are going to be a little difficult with the way the holiday falls out. Okay? Wish you all a wonderful Pesach.
Aziz and Pesach.
Aziz and Pesach.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah.
I'll take matzah.